Thank you for joining us for today's final talk. I'm George Hammond, conference producer at Technology Networks, and I'm pleased to introduce the final session of the day, Leveraging AI for Transformative Drug Discovery and Development. I'm incredibly pleased to introduce Dr. Annie Yim. Annie is a computational biologist with a PhD from the Max Planck Institute. She has dedicated her career to harnessing the power of artificial intelligence and data science in order to drive innovation in biology. Currently serving as a senior data scientist at Boehringer Ingelheim, one of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies, she now focuses on using state-of-the-art AI technologies and machine learning approaches to accelerate drug discovery and development processes. A very warm welcome to you, Annie. Following the presentation, we will also have a Q&A session, and we welcome any questions that you may have. Please ask questions using the Q&A system to the right-hand side of the video player. And now, without further delay, I'd like to hand over to Annie to begin her presentation.
Thank you for the introduction, George. Hello, everyone. So glad to be here with you all today to talk about how to leverage AI in drug discovery and development, which is a very exciting topic to me. AI, a term that everyone is talking about these days. In fact, as some of you might already know, AI or artificial intelligence is just a fancy way of saying how we get a computer program or system to do something that a human could do. But because of the recent development in algorithm, the increasing computation power, and the exponential rate of data accumulation, we can now finally build something that's really powerful and useful. Well, who hasn't used ChatGPT to rephrase a sentence or to come up with ideas when preparing a presentation for a talk? And that's why we see them being applied to almost every sector. And that includes, or I should say especially, in healthcare, pharma, and drug development, because it's indeed a huge market with a lot of opportunities. Think about the impact. We're talking about saving human lives and providing better life quality. And for years, pharma companies have accumulated a lot of data with the potential that could finally be untapped by AI. Therefore, we also see a lot of capital flowing into this direction, and we have more players joining too. Not only the traditional big pharma companies, but also tech companies and smaller drug discovery startups. However, drug discovery has a notoriously high rate of failure of approximately 90%, which probably no other sectors would accept. And this is based purely on phase 1 clinical trials. You can also see that 97% of cancer drugs actually fail during clinical trials. There are different contributing factors. A major one is the lack of clinical efficacy, because drugs that appear to be effective in vitro doesn't necessarily mean that they are still potent when applied on a broader scope in a human body with a lot more layers and complexity. Unexpected toxicity or side effect is also a problem. Sometimes it could be the dosage that causes many drugs to fail during phase 1 clinical trials. Poor drug-like properties could also amount up to 10 to 15% due to a lot of things that could happen during the preclinical stage. What's also interesting is that the whole research and development has become less efficient in the past decade. So basically, for every $1 you invested back in the 2010s, it returned 10 cents. But in the 2020s, it was reduced to only 2 cents. Some scientists and reviewers suggested that one reason is that everything that can be easily researched has been researched already. And most compounds that are easy to be synthesized have been also tested on easy targets. But now, with the help of AI, if we could, say, improve the prediction of clinical efficacy, toxicity, and so on, we could potentially save a lot of money by accelerating the development of future drug candidates. Again, we do have a huge room for improvement. We're talking about 90%. In fact, the concept of AI is not entirely new for drug discovery. It was just named differently, say computer-assisted drug design. And as early as in the 1950s, there were already reports on how people used mathematical tools to help with drug discovery. So what has changed? Why the hype now? Well, I will have to mention the launch of AlphaFold, which has a revolutionary impact on computational biology and drug discovery because of its capability to predict protein structure with unprecedented accuracy. It was even named the Breakthrough of the Year and the Method of the Year in 2021. This was made possible by, which I also mentioned earlier, the advancement of algorithm like the Transformative architecture and the tremendous increase in computing power that makes running deep neural network fast possible. But AlphaFold is just one part of the whole story in the process of drug discovery and development, which you all probably know is a very complex and diverse process. First, there is the target identification stage, which we want to find a disease-causing target. Then the lead generation and optimization stage, which we identify or generate and optimize candidate drug molecules. Next, the preclinical phase, when experiments are conducted to eliminate toxic non-safe molecules. Then the clinical phase, where clinical trials are conducted to test drugs on humans. And finally, the review and approval stage, which we prepare and submit documents for the drug to be approved and launched to market. Today, I have picked a few AI use cases to share with you to show how they can accelerate this process at each of these stages. Target identification. It's actually the process of identifying the right biological molecules or cellular pathways that can be modulated by drugs to achieve therapeutic benefits. It can be classified into 3 approaches: experimental, computational, and multi-omics. Of course, these methods can also be used collaboratively. And I would like to talk about a use case that focuses on multi-omics data using computational approaches like machine learning. Multi-omics data refers to genomic data, dynamic expression data, proteomics data, and metabolic profiles. These data was made available also by technology advancement like next generation sequencing, and then large-scale genome-wide association studies, or GWAS, that follow. But integrating and analyzing these data is very challenging for humans due to the vast and complex nature. And here is where AI and machine learning could help. For example, a graph-based neural networks can take the topology of biological networks data, such as gene-gene networks, protein-protein interactions, and the biological features of these genes or proteins, like expression data or sequencing data, as an input. And by analyzing the biological information within the network topology, the neural network realizes the functions of link prediction, clustering, and classification. Well, let me explain with an analogy. Think of these networks as social networks that describe how people are connected with each other on Facebook or Instagram or other social platforms. These are so-called topology features. And then we have the individual features of each person, such as gender, age, education, or something that can review their interests, like their browsing history, whom they follow, what they like, etc. With graph neural networks, you would then be able to deduce, say, which persons might know each other. That's link prediction. Or Which persons might have similar characteristics? That's clustering. Or which person might lean left or right in terms of politics? That's classification. And with all this information, well, all kinds of ads that suit your taste will be pushed to you or appear on your newsfeed. Similarly, we can answer biological questions when we plug in the biological networks and biological features instead. Which genes or proteins might have interactions that are previously unknown? Which genes or proteins might have similar properties? Which genes or proteins might be a potential target for certain diseases? With this knowledge, we understand more about the networks and the biological pathways that help identify drug targets. Now, I want to talk about another use case that is related to target identification, which is made possible by the recent advancement in generative AI, or to be more specific, large language models, LLMs. Researchers and scientists often use scientific papers and literature as a source to get the information and get ideas about potential targets, as it helps understand their biological functions and the pathways, the roles in disease progression, etc. However, it's often very time-consuming to go through a large amount of text. Just to put things into perspective, a human could read on average 200 words per minute, while an LLM can read thousands of words per second. So instead of trying to do all these readings by ourselves, we could leverage LLMs by asking them questions directly about these texts, say to search and identify relevant information and summarize key findings. This can streamline the literature search process by a lot. But how is it done? So first, the huge amount of text has to be split into manageable chunks to allow for more efficient processing and analysis. These chunks are then converted into embeddings, which is a form of vector representation that captures the semantic meaning of the text. These embeddings are then stored in a vector database, creating a searchable repository of information. And when there are questions or requests, they are also converted into embeddings and compared with the stored data to search against it in order to retrieve relevant content, which is then used as an input for the LLM to generate a comprehensive answer. This process is called Retrieval Augmented Generation, RAG, which has several advantages. First, it ensures that the generated responses are contextually relevant by retrieving and using information from relevant text chunks during the retrieval process. And since the answer is grounded in the input data, this reduces hallucination, which is a phenomenon we sometimes see when using LLMs that they make things up. Also, as only the relevant text would be fed as an input, instead of the entirety of our text, it leaves more room or context window, so to speak, for your own input. Sounds pretty neat, right? Now, let's move on to the next stage, lead generation. And of course, I will have to talk about AlphaFold. Like mentioned, AlphaFold felt so revolutionary because of the huge improvement in accuracy when predicting protein structure using computational approach. But why is it important? It's because only with that, scientists can understand how potential drugs interact with their target proteins so that they can design more effective drugs with fewer side effects. Traditional experimental methods to determine protein structure, like X-ray crystallography and NMR spectroscopy, are complex and very time-consuming and costly too. So you can imagine how much time, money, and effort can be saved from that with using computational methods. How does AlphaFold work then? Basically, it takes a sequence of a protein, which is made of amino acid, and generate a highly accurate 3D model of the protein by predicting the distances and the angles between amino acids. We are not going into detail of its algorithm or architecture, but there are two things worth knowing why AlphaFold is so successful. First, it uses multiple sequence alignment, or MSA, to find sequences of proteins that are evolutionarily related to the target protein, because this extra information from related proteins could help improve the accuracy of the structure prediction. It also uses transformer-like or transformer-inspired architecture, which adopts the attention mechanism. That allows it to focus on different parts of the protein sequence instead of just the local parts and consider the entire protein context when predicting the structure of a particular segment. AlphaFold 3 was just launched earlier this year, and I call it the AlphaFold on steroids, not only because it attains an even higher accuracy in protein structure prediction, but now it goes also beyond that. It models large biomolecules, such as, of course, proteins, but also DNA and RNA, as well as smaller molecules known as ligands, and how do they fit together. This could further enhance the capabilities of scientists to design drugs by predicting drug targets interactions. Next, we move on to the development part, the preclinical stage. If you still remember, unmanageable or unexpected toxicity is one of the main reasons why a drug fails during the development. Therefore, it worth investigating if machine learning could help. A drug molecule can be represented by so-called fingerprints, which indicates the presence or absence of substructures, and SMILES, which stands for Simplified Molecular Input Line Entry System, a notation system that represents molecules as a string of characters. Both could be used as an input for a machine learning model to predict if a molecule or a drug is toxic in vitro, in vivo, or at clinical points. Moreover, SMILES, the SMILE string, could also be transformed into embeddings, which captures the important features and reduces unimportant noise or variation in the string. This further enhances the accuracy when used as an input to represent the model, the molecule itself. Finally, machine learning models could also give explanation on or identify the minimal or necessary features which are either present or absent in order for a drug to be toxic or non-toxic. By having such predictive models of toxicity, not only can experimental cost and time be reduced, ethical concerns can also be mitigated by minimizing animal and clinical testing, which is an adoption of the 3 R's principle: replacement, reduction, and refinement of animal testing. After we tested the drug candidate, we can move on to the next phase and plan our clinical trials. Here, the help of AI could be of multiple folds. First, when selecting subjects, we can perform biomarker verification to reduce variability and heterogeneity among subjects and hence increase study power. We could also select subjects that are more likely to have measurable clinical points or more likely to respond to the treatment to achieve prognostic and predictive enrichment. This could be done by analyzing multiple data sources such as EHRs, medical records, and omics data, and apply machine learning methods. Moreover, AI could be used to support patients and doctors throughout the clinical trial journey. For example, doctors and researchers could use AI tools to search and mine datasets and clinical records to make their work, such as understanding the patient or looking for subjects, more efficient. Second, AI-powered chatbots and virtual assistants can provide patients with information about the trial, to answer the question, remind them about the appointment, hence improving patient engagement. Finally, wearable devices and mobile apps can collect real-time health data that can be analyzed by AI algorithms to detect any changes in patients' health and notify them or their doctors. These all could make clinical trials safer and more effective. If we are so fortunate that the drug passes clinical trial, we can finally reach the stage to get this drug approved. And as you can imagine, we have to deal with a lot of documents and reports to prepare our submission to the authorities. Hence, it's time to call up our good old friend, retrieval augmented generation. But this time, instead of scientific paper or literature, the input will be a huge amount of clinical trial data, reports, regulatory requirements, submission documents, etc. And instead of asking questions, we can provide prompts that make the LLM review documents to be submitted, so to make sure that we are compliant to regulatory standards and are not missing anything. Or to generate standardized reports, to compile or format data. All these could greatly reduce the time and effort required during the process. Now, I have talked about a few AI use cases, but of course, the application of AI along the process of drug discovery could be much, much more than that. So you can now understand how huge the potential could be. However, there are some major issues that we have to deal with when working with AI. One major challenge is data quality. We rely heavily on data from various sources and domains, clinical trials, patients' records, experiments, etc. However, the quality and characteristics of this data can vary significantly. We sometimes encounter inconsistent, incomplete, or biased data. But the machine learning models could only be as good as the data. So how to make sure that the data quality is good enough to train models that deliver reliable results is definitely something challenging. Another is the interdisciplinary nature of our sector. We have people with diverse expertise from chemistry, biology, medicine, to crystallography and data science. Each of these fields has its own nuances and intricacies, and it's difficult for any individual or even team to fully grasp. This diversity can pose a challenge in developing machine learning models that cater to all these different perspectives and knowledge base. And then there is reproducibility. In the pharma industry, models, results, and many details are often kept secret, mainly due to competitive reasons. AlphaFold, for example, is also closed source, and the cost for producing results is usually very high. This leads to intransparency and intransferability, which limits the ability to verify and build upon existing work. Another topic that we have to address is responsible AI, which refers to how we can use and leverage AI ethically and responsibly. This is extremely important because as someone working in the healthcare sector, we see it as our responsibility to make sure that the things we do are for the benefits and safety of people, like living a healthier life, and are not causing any harm. In other words, it should be human-centric. There are a lot more principal elements within this topic, such as reliability of our AI system, transparency of the models and explainability of the results, how to ensure fairness and avoid negative bias, especially against vulnerable groups. The list goes on and on. This is a complex topic with a lot to address, but we still should try our best to uphold these principles, as this foster trust among the public and also help us make sure that we are compliant to different laws and regulations to keep AI under control. For example, the EU AI Act, Artificial Intelligence Act, that comes into force this year. Today, we have discussed a few impactful AI use cases in drug discovery and development and some of the challenges. And here are some key messages that I hope you would take home with. Again, drug discovery is complex and it's a diverse process. It's also a rapidly evolving field. Very often, breakthrough is built upon the collective knowledge of many different expertise. So we should stay humble and learn from each other, maybe other groups, other teams, or even other companies, large or small, traditional pharma companies or smaller startups. And to the extent possible, advocate for more openness and sharing. Next, AI is there and is about to bring transformative changes to the drug discovery process, the pharma industry, and our lives. But it's work in progress, and we're still facing a lot of challenges. So be patient and do not expect miracles to happen overnight, that suddenly tomorrow there will be a perfect solution for all problems. We still have a long way to go. And apart from technical challenges, there are also ethical challenges when working with AI, especially for our sector. We have to be cautious when dealing with personal data and the impact of the outcome of our AI systems. That's how we foster trust and also make sure that we are compliant to regulations. Nevertheless, we should still keep our heads up and stay optimistic. As you have seen with all these use cases, there are indeed a lot of opportunities, and it has been estimated that AI could potentially reduce the time to market of a drug by 50%. So I do believe that future is on our side. That's it for today. Thank you so much for joining me. And if you want to continue with the discussion, let's connect. Now, if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you so much, Annie, for that incredibly fascinating presentation and for sharing your expertise with us today. Just a note to our audience, before we start the Q&A segment of this session, I just want to take a quick moment to remind any viewers to submit any questions that you may have for Annie using the chat system to the right. And with that out of the way, we'll now dive into the Q&A segment. So Annie, your first question is, what are the limitations of AI in drug discovery and development? And are there any areas where human intervention is still necessary?
Right. So as I mentioned, drug discovery is complex. It's very complex. Just take our first use case, understanding the biological system as an example. While AI can help analyze large amounts of data, interpreting the result in the context of, say, complex biological system is still a challenge. So AI might struggle to understand the underlying intricacies. So we still need human experts that have deep understanding of human biology or disease pathology to help interpret the results. And once again, AI systems could only be as good as the data that they're trained on. So it still depends on human to, say, conducting clinical trials, conducting experiments, and collect data, and most importantly, make sure that it's not biased, it's not incomplete or incorrect. Another issue is ethical concerns. Apparently, we still cannot rely on AI to make an ethical decision for us. So again, humans are still needed. So we're needed to ensure that the use of AI in drug discovery respects patients' privacy and at the same time, used responsibly.
Thank you so much, Annie. That was a fascinating answer. We really do appreciate it. We still have a time for just a few more questions today. So moving on to the next question we have from our audience. How can AI help in developing personalized or targeted medicines?
As we discussed during the clinical trial use case, AI, certainly it can help, say, identify biomarkers, which can use for selection of subjects during clinical trials, but it can also be used to guide personalized treatment decision. For example, certain biomarkers might indicate that a patient will respond well to a particular drug. And together with other patients' data like the age, gender, lifestyle, etc., we, together with analyzing this data with an AI algorithm, we can predict how an individual might respond to certain treatment. And this can help tailor treatment plans that are most effective with the least side effects for each patient. And of course, AI can also help with the development of targeted therapies, like drugs that target specific genes or proteins that contribute to a disease. And this could be potentially achieved by, say, analyzing genetic data to identify potential drug targets and predict the impact of targeting these genes or proteins, especially for that particular individual.
Thank you so much, Annie. That's another great answer. And we have time for one final question today. So obviously AI is going to play a huge part in the revolution of drug discovery and development, but what are the implications of AI for large pharmaceutical companies as well as small drug discovery startups?
Well, first, it's of course certainly a very exciting time for both traditional pharma companies, large ones, and also the smaller startups alike. For traditional pharma companies, like we've discussed with several AI use cases, it could reduce both time and cost by improving the efficiency of the drug discovery process, which can potentially save companies millions of dollars in development costs. Also, there are a lot of operations that can be potentially streamlined by using AI, such as data analysis or report generation, hence freeing up resources to focus on more important or complex tasks. On the other hand, for startups, AI, I think it can level the playing field as many powerful tools that were only once available to large companies are also now accessible to smaller companies as well. And this reduces the barrier to entry into the drug discovery field and also helps smaller startups compete with the larger companies in the space. Because smaller startups, like startups in general, are often more agile and they might be better positioned to take advantage of the opportunities presented by AI. For example, they may be able to use AI to develop some novel drugs or therapies that large companies might have overlooked. So yeah, I think we should definitely learn from each other or even form alliances to leverage AI in the most effective way.
Thank you so much, Annie. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for the Q&A segment of today, but we really do appreciate you sharing your expertise and answering all those questions for us. Remember, like all the previous talks, this presentation will be available on demand viewing for the next 30 days. And that just leaves me to say a massive thank you once again to Annie, and for everyone watching. We'll be back tomorrow at 8 a.m. Pacific for another fantastic lineup of talks. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.